I'm really sorry not to be there in the room. It would be great to have a chance to chat with everybody between sessions and hear other tips and feedback. So I would love to, connect on Twitter and get to know you all that way. But this is a really fun time. We can kind of advance to the next slide. For me to be joining you as tomorrow is my 1-year Vox anniversary. So it's been really fun to put together this presentation and take a look back at, where we've really come in the last year and what we were thinking about when we were sitting down just a year ago to start this off together. I'm probably a pretty new face for most of you. I am new to the journalism world in the last year. Before Vox, I worked at a place called Blue State Digital, which was an agency that is kind of most well known for working on Barack Obama's campaign, building his digital presence. But that's kind of publicly what it's most known for. But my work there was with advocacy groups and nonprofits and brands. So it's been a very big switch for me to come over to the media side. But one I've really enjoyed, as I like to say, with a lot of my old clients, no one really woke up in the morning and thought, I wonder what's on the NAACP's website today. I better go check it out. But the lovely thing about working in news and journalism is people do actually think that. People do wake up and wonder what's happening in the world and visit many of their favorite websites to figure out what that is. But when we started at Vox, we knew that that would not be the case. People would not be waking up in the morning and would not be hitting up our homepage. And so it was really important for us that social media was just going to be absolutely crucial to our success in our first year. We knew SEO wouldn't be much of a play. And if people were going to see our content, it was because people were going to be sharing it on social. So that's really what we focused on in our first year. Next slide. And so when Ezra Klein and Melissa Bell contacted me and talked about joining the team, they really had this vision that they wanted to build a social newsroom. And, at that point, I was like, okay, I've never even worked in a newsroom, so I'm not sure exactly what we mean, but let's figure this out together. And that's what we've done in the last year. We've really figured it out together. Next slide. One thing we were very clear about is we knew what we did not want. Next slide. And that was, we did not want the social team sitting off in some corner with some secret language, talking about best practices and social media stuff away from the rest of the newsroom. One of the things we focus on really across all of Vox Media is really the integration between our product team, between our designers, between our journalists, and absolutely with our social team as well. So we did not want this get smart cone of silence. We wanted to make sure that we were all working together very closely from day one. And like I said, it was just a year ago when we were about to launch the site, and our first presentation to the staff was about social media best practices. Next slide. So we really did aim to create a newsroom of social experts. Obviously, one of our the things we had to our advantage was we were starting from scratch. So we had a lot of young new journalists who were excited to set a new tone, and how we interacted here at Vox could be new from day one. And so making sure that we were training up our writers to really be social experts was just critical. And to do that, I think your engagement editor really needs to be a senior role. In so many newsrooms, the people doing social are either more junior or separated from the room. And that really provides a lot of challenges. Another thing that we made critical right from the beginning is that readers should know how their stories are performing. There's so much feedback as to how content is consumed, who is reading content, what are they sharing, what are they clicking on. And in my opinion, there's just really no reason to keep that information from writers. Writers are working really hard to investigate the issues of the day, to report on that, to make this as clear as possible to their readers, and they should know if people are reading it and if that's getting through. So we think that's really important. And then the third piece that we started absolutely from the beginning was making sure that we had weekly lessons and best practices on social for the whole newsroom. We have a weekly staff meeting, and that's a important presentation each week, is both learning from each other, learning how other stories are doing, but also learning, what's changing. Social media, as everyone in the room is well aware, changes all the time. And so making sure that our writers feel equipped both for the tools they have at their disposal, how they can use social media to find stories, to report, to see what people are talking about, but also what they need to be doing to make sure that their content is really packaged in the best possible way for social media is really important too. Next slide. So, with our writers, what they really are thinking about when they're creating content, first and foremost, above all, and we'll get into this a little bit more later in the presentation, is how can they create the best content possible? It's really important at Vox that we are creating content for the general reader. And so how can we communicate what is happening in the world in a way that is clear and succinct and people can engage with that is absolutely critical. And without question, their first concern. Their second concern, though, and very important before they publish, is how is that content packaged? Is it packaged in a way that people on the internet are going to click on it and want to read it and then want to share it with their friends? And so the two parts of that we really see as most important are the headline and caring about the share image. Like how it shows up on Facebook is really, 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 really crucial. And so we talk about this all the time. In terms of headlines, we do a lot of working together, focus grouping our headlines, coming up with a lot of options, and that's done for every single piece that goes up on the web. And the same is true with the image. If the image is not cropped properly, if it's not interesting, if it's not something someone would be willing to share on their Facebook wall, then that's something we make a change right away to the content. And next slide. And we also, we think it's really important to make sure that we're providing, like I mentioned, these lessons on a weekly basis. And this was just a great exchange in our Slack room not too long ago of one of our writers just being thrilled that she used one of the tips we had given in our weekly meeting, and she was seeing great success with it. And it's really fun to watch how our writers have responded in the last year. So many of them are kind of digital natives on the younger side, but they just soak up these lessons and are so interested in it and really want their content to be read. And so when you can help them have success, it's been really, really rewarding. Next slide. But beyond thinking about just kind of best practices in more of a, how do you construct a headline? How do you pick the right share image? We also like to talk about kind of philosophically, what do we know about people on the internet? What do people share? And this was from a really interesting New York Times case study a couple of years ago. There were 3 points that I just thought were really helpful in thinking about what makes content that people want to share. The first is if people want to bring valuable and entertaining content to others. You see this all the time on Facebook. People want to be the first person to have that really cool thing that other people are going to comment on, that other people are going to be talking about. People like to be conversation starters, and so that's been really helpful. Another thing we see time and time again is that people share to define themselves to others. Facebook is a very we like to think of social media, I guess, in general as something that's very community building and interactive, and it absolutely is. But one thing that's also really important to remember is it's also a place for egos, and people are looking to define themselves, to say who they are to the world, and that really has an impact on the kind of content they want to share and how that content is framed. And then the third piece from this New York Times case study was people really do share things to get the word out about causes or issues they care about. So, we see that in the types of content people share. There'll be like, the stream of people that are interested in sharing environmental news, the stream of people that are interested in, identity politics. A lot of these things, you kind of see the repeat shares in the same areas. But it's true. It's a way that people like to start conversation and define themselves to the world around them. So moving on now just a bit, it's another thing that we talk about on the next slide too with our staff is really knowing our audience. And that's something that the social team can do to a point, but also is really helpful feedback from the writers. Next slide. What we've learned in our first year about Vox's audience, which has been really fun, is they are nerdy and wonky and really care about being informed. Which is really outstanding. They are definitely curious about the world around them. And they are typically generally interested in issues of fairness and justice. When articles are framed that way, they often tend to do very well for us. And next slide. One thing that's been really helpful from our writers is knowing where their particular audience is. There was the season premiere of Community happening, and our culture editor said, there is a great community of people on Reddit that just love Community. And we know that our culture stuff sometimes doesn't do quite as well on Facebook, and we were like, great. Let's go to Reddit. Let's do an AMA. Let's see what people want to talk about. And this was just absolutely incredible. AMA with our culture editor, who had just really interesting questions from people that have been following him for years, but also are really interested in the show. And it was great to give him the opportunity to engage directly with our audience right at that place. But this conversation, it did amazingly on Reddit. It would not have done the same on our Facebook page. It would not have done the same if it had been a Twitter chat. So it's really, really valuable to have our writers and our editors involved in social conversations across the web and to know where those conversations are happening. And next slide. And absolutely, though, above all, what is most important for creating a social newsroom is really, truly just comes down to creating great content. Next slide. This, of course, everybody remembers the tricks rabbit, silly rabbit, tricks are for kids, but we can go to the next slide. But tricks really do only get you so far. And I think most of the times when I'm in conversations about social media or how can we get our content to spread, you find people just really, really obsessing about the Facebook algorithm and what they should do and how they can do this, and maybe they should post it at this hour instead of that hour. And it is a baffling, challenging world to live in, where there are so many things that you can't control in terms of, who Facebook is showing your content to. But we find again and again and again that the less we obsess with trying to game some system or thinking about these this rule or that rule, and just make really great content, that really great content is what does well. People just want to share something that is interesting, is fascinating, is well done. And if you can get it out there to them, it's going to go. Next slide. So we've seen that, a lot of people worry that when you're thinking about social media or focused on what is successful on social media, that you're just going to end up with a lot of fluff. And I am so thrilled to be able to say after Vox's first year that popular content is absolutely not all puppies and kittens. We have had a lot of really incredible successes in the first year on social media, and they have been about really serious topics, really serious issues. They have often been long form articles. It's really been wonderful to see. So here are just a few examples on the next slide. This was a story we did after the news out of Ferguson. It was really long, really detailed. And as you can see from just the share button numbers there, it became a hugely successful article on our site. Part of it, of course, it helped that it was written by Ezra Klein, our editor-in-chief, who has a lot of readers. But also, we had a headline that was compelling. It hit at a time when people on social media were talking about it, and it really just kept spreading for days and days and days. The next slide. This was one of our videos that did really, really well on YouTube. You can see there was 19 million views and still climbing every day. And this was an inside look at an MRI machine. It was nerdy, it was fascinating, and it was a really unique look at experience. Lots of people have had MRIs, but to see how the body works, to see what it's like when you swallow some juice, as this inside look at this MRI machine was. It was really, really fascinating, and exactly the type of content that our audience just eats up. The next slide. This is another great example of how serious topics talked about in a smart, serious way can do really well. This was our interview with President Obama, obviously, well-known, popular guy. But I mean, there's been lots of interviews with President Obama recently, and we found our audience really responding so well to this and sharing this. And it was because it was just interesting, smart content. It was a look and a conversation with the president that was pretty different than the way other outlets had done it. And we were just thrilled to see the way our audience responded there. And the last example I have here, you often don't think of wide-ranging sharing content being about something like Ebola, but this one was really, really effective for us. And the thing that is so fun for me with this graphic was that it came about in exactly the way we want to approach social. It came about from a conversation between our health policy editor, our editor-in-chief, Ezra Klein, myself, and one of our designers. And it was because we are all so used to working together and brainstorming things together. We knew the news that Ebola was coming to the US, and we had a quick conversation like, how will people respond to this? What do we already know? What is the reporting we've done? And the first question we all had, like everyone did, is, oh my God, am I gonna get Ebola? And we had very quick answer from our team, no, you are not. And so we put together this simple graphic. It was really easy to consume. We made it in the shape that does well on Twitter, but obviously also this did very well on Facebook. At the point of posting this, I think we had maybe 150,000 fans to our Facebook page. And yet the spread, as you can see here, was shared 58,000 times, which was really incredible. But we took a very basic approach. How do you give people the kind of content they want right when they want it? And this was the kind of information that people wanted to share to their friends. There was panic everywhere. People were freaking out. And so we just made it very simple, very easy to share. And also it did get, like you can see in the copy description here, we link back to a lot more information. So we were able to give people more of what they were looking for, in addition to just the simple facts. So the next slide is just to wrap up that, yeah, a lot of our most popular content, Ferguson, an MRI machine, a policy interview, and content about Ebola is not sometimes what you think about when you think of, what does well on the internet. But we've just been really, really thrilled to see that in our first year, our audience is very interested in serious matters, talked about in plain and simple way, that they want to share with their friends. So that's been really great. And next slide. So what works is for the most part quite simple. I mean, tons of work goes into the back end, but at the end of the day, knowing your audience, knowing where they are. Something we've been very strict about from the beginning, especially on Facebook because of the algorithm, is only posting great content. If it's not really strong content, then we don't post it. We're less concerned about posting the number of times we post a day, and really more concerned with just making sure the content that we're putting out is content that will work on that particular social network and is really going to do its best. And then post it in a way that shows it off. I think that really stands out with the Ebola graphic. That information was in a number of articles we did. It was in videos we did, but we knew that that was just what needed to be said in a very simplistic way at that moment. And so we created it as a visual just to make it as simple as possible. And that really, really worked for us. And the last slide then is, when social wins really are newsroom wins. And that's something that we talk about a lot here. It's not the social team did great. It's really, the focus is on the writers and how their content is doing and the care and thought that they're putting into that. So we provide a lot of feedback to writers. I have a lot of conversations with our writers discussing how particular stories did, things that worked, things that didn't, what we can do differently next time. We then also, number two, teach our best practices to the whole newsroom, and we make sure we celebrate wins as wins for the writer and wins for the whole team. And so that's it. That's my next slide is last one, and happy to take questions if there's still time. I know we were a bit tight here, but
we are unfortunately. But I can tell you that Twitter's been on fire since you started, and a lot of people are saying amen and hear to a lot of the things you're saying. So thank you for joining us, and I think we'll probably try to continue that conversation there.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Allison.